Hey everybody, Neil Malik with Knack Training here, bringing you another Everyday Office video. And in today's video, I'd like to show you 8 of the most critical keyboard shortcuts you can use when you're working in an Excel spreadsheet. These 8 shortcuts are about selecting and navigating whatever components you want within this spreadsheet. So let's begin with a little bit of navigation. There are 3 major ways that you can navigate through this spreadsheet in a way that makes it faster. First, you can use Control Home. Control Home in every spreadsheet that you have will take you directly to cell A1 without pausing, without jumping to any specific area along the way. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have Control End. Now, as you can see from Control End right here, for me, it goes to the O column and to the 35th row. You can clearly see that my data goes down to the 35th row, but you can also tell that right now there is nothing in that O column. Well, interestingly, just a moment ago before I deleted it, I had something in the O column and then I got rid of it. Excel remembers that I had information in that O column, and so it considers the O column to be the last used column in the spreadsheet. So Control End will take you to the intersection of the last used column and the last used row. Now, if you're on a set of contiguous data, like the one that's in the middle part of my screen, let's say you're on cell E6, for example, you can use the Control key with the arrow keys to navigate to specific points in this set of data very quickly. So if I want to get to Heather Kasim's salary as quickly as possible, I will use the Control key and the right arrow. So Control right arrow takes me from the date of birth column all the way over to the salary column, the last column in this contiguous set of data. If I go back to cell E6 and I use Control down arrow, it takes me to E35, the last cell in the column that's being used. Control up will of course take me to the top cell in the column that's being used, and Control left to the farthest left cell that's being used. Now, interestingly, I like to think of Control and the arrow keys as playing The Floor is Lava. If you played that when you were a kid, basically the concept here is if I start from Sherry Smith's first name right here, and I use Control right arrow, it will take me to the end of Sherry Smith's record, but it will not take me over to the office, San Diego, which is a couple cells over from there. Because as you can see here, there's contiguous data from Sherry over to $54,000, but not contiguous out to San Diego. So I consider this to be the functional equivalent of a little kid starting at one end of the couch and running to the other end of the couch. Then he's standing at one end of the couch and he wants to jump across over to the chair that's near the couch. So I'll use Control right arrow again, and as you can see, it jumps across that empty gap there and over to San Diego. Control left arrow jumps back across that gap, and Control left arrow again takes me back to Sherry's first name. So Control plus the arrow keys stops at whatever the empty cells are in your spreadsheet. If I go a step further than that, if I use Control down arrow and I get to Adrian, and then I use Control down arrow again, Excel will expect I want to go to the very last row in the entire sheet. Control up arrow takes me back to C35. Control up arrow takes me to the first name column's label. Now let's talk about selecting. The first concept in selecting is that you have to know where your context is. If you click outside of the contiguous data that's here, somewhere out in the middle of nowhere in your spreadsheet, you can use the keyboard shortcut Control A to select the entirety of the contents of that sheet. Notice here it's going through employees, the entire list of employees, the list of offices over here on the side, as well as all the blank cells. However, if I click within the set of data that has all of our employees, and then I use Control A in context selects all the contiguous data that's here. In the same way, if I were to click on one of these offices over here on the right-hand side and use Ctrl A, you can see that it selects the entirety of that list, but none of the other information that's on the sheet. So Ctrl A selects all, but selects all in a contextual way, based on what you're doing at that point in time. Besides being able to select all the data, you may want to be able to select the entire column or the entire row. Control spacebar, as you can see, selects the entire column that you're in, including the information about the date of birth here, but also many cells that are not filled in with dates of birth. And in the same way, the keyboard shortcut Shift spacebar allows you to select the entirety of a row, all the way across the 7th row, for example, but doesn't care about where your data is. It includes blank cells, it includes cells in other little lists, it includes everything. So besides the keyboard shortcuts of Control Space and Shift Space, there are a couple of others that might be more contextually interesting. So if, for example, I clicked on cell A1 or I used Control Home to get to cell A1, if I use Control Shift End, notice that it selects all of the information that's in my sheet. It selects every row and column that's being used anywhere in this sheet, and then I could very easily copy this over into another set of information. But the other thing that I think is very valuable is if I decide that I want to highlight all the dates of birth, for example, I probably don't want to include the cells that don't have dates of birth in them. So if I go to cell E4, the very first cell in the date of birth column, I can hold down the Shift key while using my normal navigation shortcuts in order to select. So Control down arrow would have taken me to cell E35. By holding the Shift key while I do it, Control Shift down arrow, I'm then able to select from E4 down to E35. You see, it gets me every single date of birth, but none of the information that's outside this list. Or if I went to Angela Clark's first name in cell C7, I probably want to be able to grab Angela Clark's entire record without going over there and grabbing Los Angeles or Westminster or whatever's over there on the right-hand side. So I wouldn't want to use Shift spacebar here. Instead, I'd want to use Control Shift right arrow. So Control and Shift together with the arrow keys will get all the contiguous data and none of the information that's outside the list that you're looking at, the contextual information.